issues, and we'll keep working on it, and I'll keep going. With me today is the MIOSHA team representing the west side of the state. We have Deb with the SET division as a safety consultant. Some of you may have had the opportunity to work with Deb. Catherine, who's fairly new to MIOSHA. She's been with us several years, and Catherine is a GI safety officer. Audrey is our IH on the west side of the state with the TNC program. Chris Johnson is working with ASSP as our alliance liaison. Chris covers the safety issues in the southern west counties of Michigan. And Tara Kyle, even though her picture's not on this slide, Tara is with us online as well. She is a construction division safety supervisor. And what I want to ask my team today to do is either respond to questions that might come up in the chat, or either I'll open the mic if need be to provide an opportunity to respond to questions. And periodically throughout the presentation, we'll be looking at addressing some of the questions that have come up. I don't think it's news to most people that have had some experience in MIOSHA that our mission and our role in relation to legislation is to protect the safety and health of Michigan workers. And you'll hear me throughout this presentation talk about educating before we regulate, which is a big part of how we operate in MIOSHA. And okay, guys, I am going to address the elephant in the room. Typically, a Coffee with MIOSHA event would go right into some discussion about current issues, standards that we're working on, but we cannot talk about COVID and the impact it's had on our workplace. In March, MIOSHA started focusing more on telework opportunities and went almost 100% into addressing COVID concerns in the workplace. On the screen, you see a screen capture of our website. And for the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a bit about what we can do to help you with addressing COVID issues in the workplace. You may not know, because this is fairly hot off the press, last week, MIOSHA came out with emergency rules. Don't panic. If you have already been dealing and complying with the executive orders that have been around since April, you are probably sitting really well with emergency rules, as the emergency rules closely follow the expectations of the executive orders that we're no longer enforcing, with a focus a bit more on workplace issues. If you're familiar with the executive orders, you may recall that there were certain things in there that may not have been typically things we would address for workplace safety and health issues. So as much as possible, we stay to the focus of addressing workplace controls that would impact employee exposure issues. The exception in most cases will be face coverings. We do not see face coverings as PPE. However, we see it as an effective tool of minimizing employee exposures. So along with the epidemic orders that were issued by HHS, MIOSHA is also talking about face coverings. Providing guardrails. The focus here is really to try not to specify exactly how workplaces should comply with the new emergency rules, but expecting that because every workplace is unique, you take a performance-based aspect. Some of the things we'll be doing in addition to enforcing the emergency rules are expectations set by CDC and OSHA. The first thing you really need to think about is, what is your employee's risk? And then you need to categorize those risks as low, medium, high, or very high, because that does have a lot of impact on how you comply. Second step is to develop and implement a plan. Administrative controls, engineering controls, PP, those are not new control issues. You just need to think about applying those control measures as relates to protecting your employees against a virus. For example, administrative controls, by now we're very familiar with things like health screening, social distancing, cleaning, ramping up our processes from the standpoint of frequency. Physical barriers. Right now I'm sitting behind a physical barrier from my coworkers and hosts in a conference room as we sit 6 feet apart from each other. On my screen, I have a visual reminder that additional tools that we're providing you are some workplace.
Here's a question that came through.
Yeah, no,
Sure.
we have a question that came through with one of the audience members. Her name is Anna, and she's got a question with MIOSHA. Is so involved with enforcing COVID rules. Is MIOSHA not as involved with construction safety enforcement?
No, actually, we're just as much as involved. Admittedly, because we have been ramping up to respond to the huge increase in complaints as it relates to COVID issues, our divisions are crossing over, meaning that the general industry division is getting support from construction staff, but that does not mean in any way that the compliance issue as it relates to the construction industry has changed. Thank you for that question. Ventilation controls are a common engineering control, and we still have 2 webinars scheduled with ASHRAE as our co-host as relates to ventilation issues, and we'd encourage you to join Sean during those presentations. On our website, you'll see a picture that will look very similar to what you're seeing on my presentation that has a whole list of guidelines developed for specific industries. That was initially expectation that was set on by the governor's office as it relates to executive orders. Because the emergency rules still have industry specific requirements, we have kept most of those guidelines, but they are all updated. At the bottom of this screen, you'll see darker colored squares. One talks about a sample plan, and the other talks about a reopening checklist. Those are some additional tools that have been developed beyond the guidelines to help employers to create their plan and think about issues as it relates to reopening workplaces. Ambassador program. For about 2 months now, at the request of the governor's office and our director, we have had staff, primarily SETS consultants, go out knocking on doors to workplaces on the east side and the west side of the state that primarily have high levels of contact with the public. Workplaces such as restaurants, bars, retail, gas stations, as an example. They're non-enforcement, and they're there when they knock on the doors to help employers to determine if they are in compliance with the emergency rules. The tool they're using to help employers assess their compliance is available for you to use on our website. It is a document about 4 or 5 pages long, a checklist of issues for you to consider in relation to the expectations and requirements that are set by the emergency rules. We have set up a hotline system in MIOSHA. On average, we're seeing about 300 calls coming into the hotline a week. These calls are addressed by MIOSHA staff primarily in the cases where our phone line agents cannot respond to a question that's posed. That call is referred to a MIOSHA field staff. So please, if you have questions about COVID, either ones that we don't answer today live, don't hesitate for calling our hotline. Okay, we're going to switch gears from COVID. Other things are happening besides COVID. One of those things is renewal of our MyWish grants. We have started a new fiscal year this month. October 1 marks a new fiscal year for state agencies. And since 2015, we have been setting aside funds specifically for employers to match to purchase safety and health equipment. The max is $5,000. The focus is small employers. And this year, once again, we're dedicating about $250,000 to this grant program. The application process is fairly simple and it's available online. Another grant program, and I put this on the front of my presentation instead of the back of my presentation, because sometimes I've learned through years of working with employers and coffee with MIOSHA events is no matter how great SET thinks they are, there are some employers that really want to hear the message from someone else. And we know that. And we've been for years setting aside about $1 million to provide funding to grantees. This month, we let grants to 21 grantees. And the list is not a new list of grantees. Some of these grantees have been partnering with MIOSHA for many, many years. For example, the Center for Workplace Violence Prevention has been a grantee with MIOSHA probably 10 plus years. In red, however, are some new grantees this year. On this side of the state, we have Grand Valley State University that's doing some training, confined space, lockout training, fall protection for our general industry. Lawrence Tech over on the east side of the state in Southfield, Michigan has a construction program, and they are getting funding this year to do some COVID training in the construction industry. Another new grantee this year on this side of the state is Spectrum Health Lakeland Foundation. Their focus down in the St. Joe area is respirator training for the healthcare setting, particularly focusing on small healthcare settings like dentist's office and doctor's office. So I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about our grantees and the process, to visit our website. They typically post their set funded training activities on their own websites, but our website will provide a bridge to those grantees' information. Throughout my presentation, you'll hear me talk about our strategic plan goals. We have 3 overarching goals for fiscal year 19 through 23. That's a 5-year plan. First and foremost, reducing exposures, injuries, illness, and fatalities. I have a question.
All right, we have another question here, and this has to do with the WISH program. The question is, do you have to be an employer of less than 250 for those grants as well?
That is preferred. I have yet to hear of a grantee that was denied based on size, but because in our minds, small companies tend to have less resources when it comes to safety and health commitments. That's our priority, but it won't exclude a larger company. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great, I hope that answered your question, S. Gardner. Thank you very much for that question.
You'll also hear me talk about promoting benefits for a positive safety culture and strengthening public confidence in MIOSHA. This graphic should be a visual reminder to all of us of how effective we all have been. All safety and health professionals have played a huge part in seeing a continuous downward trend in the rate of illness and injuries in Michigan. This chart specifically talks about private industries, but if we lump public and private together, you see a similar downward trend. And the most recent data, 2018 data, shows that we are at about 3.1 cases per 100 full-time employees. And I want to keep that in mind as we go throughout this presentation, because that's part of our strategic plan. Reducing rates, those are things that we can measure, something we can count to show the impact of our efforts. So one of our goals is to reduce by 2% a year overall rates for illness and injury in high hazard industries. Who are those guys? Are you one of the high hazard industries in Michigan that we're trying to reach out to? We've identified 8 for this 5-year cycle, and some of them are not new industries. There's industries we've been following, tracking, and improving, and working with for years through coordinated efforts with SET and enforcement. So we're talking about nursing homes, which in that bracket is their NAICS code, and then 5.6 is their most recent TRC rate, total recordable case rate in Michigan. And comparing that to an overall rate of 3, that's still up there a bit. However, that downward arrow is an indication of how their rates for 18 compared to the previous year. And as you can see on this graphic, 6 of the 8 industries have shown a downward trend in rates compared to the previous year. So that's an indication that we and these industries that you are helping and we are helping are on the right track. So our focuses really are try to put the biggest bang or above where the bang is for the industries that have the highest rates. Wood product, hospitals, primary metal, fabricated metal, manufacturing machinery manufacturing, transportation equipment manufacturing. Michigan is still a strong automotive state, supportive activity for transportation. If I was to go through every sub-bullet of our 3-point strategic plan, we'd be here all day. So I'm just going to highlight certain elements of our strategic plan that I think you should know about and show things that you can help us with in relation to having impact on rates. In the construction industry, and there was an earlier question about what we're doing with the construction industry, what is NAICS 23. The focus is reducing DART rates. I have a question.
All right, we have a question here going back to the previous slide from Jim McLaughlin. And it is, how can you verify this is real data and not lack of recording of such data by these industries?
That's a good question. And I'm sure there's always going to be some possibility of misrecording, and that's some of the things our consultants work with employers on is correct recording. We have training we provide and tutorials we provide, and we also do a cross-section verification. We have within MIOSHA a specific group of staff that follow up with industries to verify their rates. So yes, there is the possibility of misrecording, but we're fairly confident that those rates, and keep in mind these are rates, not actually numbers of employees that are injured, are accurate in comparison to other states and the national rates.
Thanks for your question, Jim.
For the construction industry, their impact that they're looking at is DART, days away, restriction, and transfer injury and illness rates. Why are they looking at having impact on DART? DART is a reflection of severity of the injury. So the more ill you are, the more hurt you are, the longer you're going to be away from work, the more restrictions you're going to have, the longer transfer time you're going to have in relation to not being able to do a task in relation to an injury that you suffered. So our focus in the construction industry is to see a reduction in the DART rate. Related to that is fatality rates, because they go hand in hand. Even though a fall may not kill you, you can have a very long recovery time due to a fall, or being struck by, or caught between equipment. Again, 1.3 and 1.4 in relation to our strategic plan and focus are closely related. Let's talk a bit about falls, not just in construction, but in general industry as well. What you're seeing is 4 years history, MIOSHA's history in relation to workplace fatalities as it relates to falls. In 2016, when we said we really need to focus on falls more, 50% of the fatalities we saw at that time were tree trimmers and roofers falling off of heights. We saw a reduction of the tree trimmers in 17, but an increase in the roofers. In 19, our most recent year of looking at MIOSHA fatality data, we had 11 of the 37 workplace fatalities that were recorded due to falls. Some dropped from 51%, but we still have a ways to go. And how were they falling? Some were falling from elevations, but again, we want to make sure you understand that a slip can be just as dangerous, can be just as fatal as falling from a height. Again, back to a question was asked earlier about what impact does a construction division have? What are they doing in these COVID times? They are still doing inspections that relates to fall prevention. They have emphasis placed on fall activities. I have a question.
All right, we have a question with Jim McLaughlin, and the question is, do you have an age breakdown on falls? The older workers may be more at risk for falls.
That's a great question, and yes, if you go to the BLS data source, they slice and dice data up in multiple ways. I don't have it in my presentation, but yes, you can get information based on gender, age, and a number of other factors, which are some analysis of who's falling and how and when, right down to the day of the week that they're falling.
Thanks for your question, Jim.
We see an increase in inspections that construction did last year as it relates to falls, increase in the number of serious violations they identified, as well as an increase in the penalties that were issued related to serious fall prevention violations. I mentioned fatalities, and I want you to know that we do provide information as soon as we have it to employers. If you're not aware of that, via our Gov delivery and our website, we publish information about work-related fatalities. We were asked to do that about 4 or 5 years ago. The safety and health professionals were saying there was value for them to be able to share that information either in a toolbox talk, as part of a newsletter, and to evaluate situations that were very similar to the fatalities that were reported. So we were asked, and it's probably one of our more commonly searched piece of information on our website is information about the fatality notifications that we send out. Switching gears to strategic goal 2, where we want to talk a bit more about how do we have impact beyond enforcement. What can we do beyond going out and doing inspection and writing citations and assessing penalties? We can help via training employers, make them a more educated workforce, a more knowledgeable workforce when it comes to safety and health hazards. One of the ways we do that is with the MIOSHA Training Institute. One of our focuses is to continue increasing participation, which is a challenge during COVID times. If you're not aware, many of our programs have gone virtual or hybrid, where we're trying to minimize the face-to-face contact we're having with our attendees by allowing them to participate online in some of our MTI classes. As well, 24/7 online offerings, we're increasing that, where it's non-instructor-led, self-paced classes that we're offering, and we're encouraging people to continue to use our scholarships. Last year, we had 162 classes. Our Participation was up. It wasn't at 5% increase like what we were hoping for. It was about 3% increase, but we see continuous growth in participation in MTI, certificates awarded, and we are working now on our third online course, with our second one being released, part 1, earlier this year. I added this slide to my presentation as a visual reminder for those that are used to getting the catalog in their mailbox. You didn't get one from us this year. The reason being that everything was in such a state of flux as it relates to scheduling classes. We did not have the opportunity to publish classes. In many cases, our co-sponsors, the community colleges that we tend to work with, were closed. So they were not able to respond to our request to schedule classes until the last minute. So information about our MTI class is available on our website. However, this year, for the first time in probably 20 years, we have not published a hard copy catalog. Connecting. One of the things we do in relation to connecting is what we're doing right now, a Coffee with MIOSHA event. This is something we've been doing for a while. Take a Stand Day. I have a question.
Yes, we have a question here a little earlier from Ann S. And the MTI MIOSHA classes are still in person. How are you keeping the safety students safe while in the classroom? Why are the classes not all moved to webinars?
That's an excellent question. One of the reasons all the classes have not moved online is because the feedback we were getting from the consultants that teach those classes is the content and the structure of the class didn't lend itself to online presentation, meaning that they had, for example, group activities and show and tell opportunities that was better done face-to-face, which meant either we limited the number of those classes that we offered or we just have not run them. In other cases, actually I have two of my consultants in the room with me now, and we've been talking about some of the things that our co-sponsors have been asked to do in order to have face-to-face classes, like social distancing and wearing face masks while we're actually presenting. So we are following some of the same rules that we're expecting the colleges and universities to follow, and the public schools, when it comes to doing face-to-face presentations if we choose to do them. And for those students that are not comfortable participating in a face-to-face class, we encourage them to do the hybrid, meaning they take the class virtually from their office or their home. We understand there are those who no matter what we say or do will not be comfortable, and we respect that.
Thank you very much, Nella, and thank you for your question, Ann. And Deb Zeal, she's also a MIOSHA consultant, and she responded to everyone to say a little bit further on that. So feel free to review that in the chat room. And again, Deb Zeal is a MIOSHA compliance officer. So
thank you, Deb. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Deb. And by the way, for the other MIOSHA staff online, besides Deb, Tara, Catherine, please feel free to respond to some of the chat. I cannot see the chat in the conference room today. Chris and Audrey are also online, so you have at least 5 MIOSHA staff right with you live today, available to respond to some of the questions. And I encourage you, even after today, that you continue to reach out to the consultants for assistance.
And Kim has a question too. Who do I talk to about getting a transcript for the classes that I have taken?
You should be talking to Macomb Community College. For those that may not be clear as to what the question is related to, this is in relation to getting a transcript or evidence of the MTI classes you have completed. Macomb Community College college partners with us. They maintain the data as it relates to the classes completed, CEUs issued for those classes. Steve is readily available and works Monday through Friday, assisting MIOSHA with MTI issues. And I'm sure if you reach out to Steve at Macomb, he will respond within 24 hours.
And then Kevin Kelsick also has a question. And he states, we have a student registered for a class held locally, which was canceled due to a lack of enrollment. There is much more involved to send a student to a class further away, which involves travel, hotel, etc. Has there been any consideration of waiving minimum enrollment requirements as people are made aware that in-person classes have resumed and become comfortable with controls?
That's an excellent question. And believe it or not, when I was looking at a cancellation we had in Alpena this week, last week, I was asking myself that same question. Was this a class that strictly was a face-to-face class, or was it a virtual or hybrid class? And that definitely is something I'm discussing with staff and management as to what's going on in relation to lowering the expectation or the bar for minimum enrollment if we're doing virtual or hybrid classes. Thank you for that question. What other things are we doing to connect? Unfortunately, we did not do a many expos this year in March. That is our busy construction conference time. And unfortunately, that's when many conferences, including the Michigan Safety Conference, were making decisions about whether they were gonna go. So what you're seeing on our screen right now is what we did through September of this past year. 25 expos, conferences. We love to continue doing, but we are mindful of the conference schedulers' expectations. We've already heard that the Michigan Safety Conference is going virtual, and we expect that we'll seeing that throughout 2021. However, you can reach out to us via email. We have a system set up that we call Ask MIOSHA. This past year, 357 responses were given to questions that were asked. Those questions are typically assigned to a set consultant to respond to within 3 business days. Gov delivery messages. We try not to spam our subscribers. Our goal is to send out 2 to 3 messages max a week. And what we try to do is send out messages that are current and issues that we think are pertinent to our 18,000 plus subscribers. If you're not aware, we have a video library that we subscribe to and pay for, probably about $1 a stream, that's readily available for you. Any Michigan employer can ask to use the library, and we have not setting limits on the use of our streaming library. And it has increased from about, when we first started this, we were streaming about 5,000 videos a year, and we're now up to about 25,000 videos a year employers or employees are viewing. High rate contact. The intent with this project was to reach out to those companies in Michigan that were the high hazard company, meaning they had self-reported rates, which, as you know, you're required to do, report your rates via federal OSHA's database. They share that information with the states. We get 7,000 to 8,000 employer contacts in relation to high hazard companies that have rates that are not only higher than the state's average, but they're higher than their industry average. And those are the ones that we feel we really need to knock on the door or pick up the phone and say, you know, we really would like to talk to you about how we can help you reduce your I&I rates.
think there's another question
Mm-hmm.
from Brett. He said, I tried to sign up for the level 1 boot camp that was being offered in Muskegon this spring, but it wouldn't allow it. Has the course been canceled due to COVID? And if so, will the boot camp course resume at some point?
Do you know that? Was that your boot camp?
That was one of Deb's, but yeah, I believe that one was canceled because of COVID.
Okay.
But I believe boot camps are starting up again, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
And hopefully Deb might respond to what we're doing in relation to trying to reschedule some things with the boot camps. The boot camp, by the way, for those who don't know what a boot camp is, was a way to quickly achieve completion of your level 1 or level 2 requirements. What we were finding is that even though we initially were trying to give people 3 years to complete a MTI certificate, employers or employees wanted it faster. They said, I don't need that long of a time to complete. I really would like to do this in a span of a much shorter time period. So we started offering boot camps, which will allow completion within a span of 2 to 3 weeks max. Outreach activities, going to talk a bit about what's going on with a specific state emphasis program. That's what SEP stands for. Sometimes at the national level, NEP, or the state level, SEP, a OSHA program identifies a need to focus on an issue. Earlier this year, we had 2 SEPs as related to COVID. One was specifically for hospitals, the other was specifically for retail. In this case, the SEP for silica is an extension of the National Emphasis Program for silica, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that project. In August, we released an instruction, and by the way, all of our instructions are viewable and readily available on our website. And so this document tells our own staff as well as the general public as to what is MIOSHA doing in relation to addressing this hazard. This is instruction that applies to reducing employee exposure to respirable silica, and the focus is also really to prevent not a new disease, probably one of the oldest occupational health hazards known to man. Silicosis is not new. However, sometimes the way people are exposed to silica is new. All of our divisions, including TSD, Technical Service Division, which is our lab, are involved with applying the expectations of the new standards that we adopt and the SEP. And initially, our focus is educating. About 600 letters, 700 letters went out last month to industries that are known to have silicosis exposures. And on this screen, and I apologize for the small font, but it shows the industries that we identify as the ones we need to talk to. For example, ready-mix concrete manufacturing. Right now we identify at least 80 of them in the state of Michigan. All of them have received a letter making them aware of this SEP and encouraging them to use set services if they're not confident in the control measures they have in place to prevent silica exposure. The letter also informs that recipient of the letter is they are on a list to get an inspection. That does not mean all 700 recipients of that letter are getting inspections. It means they are in the pool of employers to get an inspection, and the focus will be at least 90 inspections, GI or construction, this year as it relates to silica exposure. The other graphic on this slide is a screen capture of our silica webpage. Again, the focus here is to provide you with some information about silica, a one-stop location on our website of everything we have to say about silica, such as sample exposure control plans, a training tool, as well as links to federal resources. So we strongly encourage you to reach out to SET staff if you have concerns about your silica exposures. I mentioned earlier fostering confidence in MIOSHA. Would you find it hard to believe that some folks really don't trust MIOSHA? They really are not comfortable picking up the phone and calling MIOSHA. And we work hard to try to build the confidence in ourselves and our employers in Michigan that they can reach out to us because we have integrity, we are reliable, we are respecting their issues, and we want to help them. We want to work with them to reduce employee exposure issues. We get asked for feedback. We get feedback in the form of comment cards. We routinely are doing customer surveys. For example, one of our surveys that we do is for the MTI grads. Every time a student graduates, we send them a survey and we ask them, how did we do from day one when you learned about MTI to the day you received your certificate? Identify for us any issues that you think might help us improve MTI. And we use that information to continuously improve how we offer our services, and we share that information with our consultants. At the bottom of this slide was feedback from one of our clients that worked with one of our industrial hygienists in SET. Building confidence in our services mean that one way we do that is ensure that we respond to complaints in a timely manner. The average that's expected, and this is a national average, is 10 working days of receipt of an employee complaint. Our most recent average, and we talked to Federal OSHA about our response time as well as other activities on a quarterly basis, is currently about 7 days. So we feel that we're being very responsive to issues that employees bring up to MIOSHA. Another way we show respond and show demonstrate our ability for employers to have confidence in us is how we respond to fatalities. Again, a national expectation that we respond to fatalities within one work day, and we do that on all of our fatalities. What did we do last year? Again, I mentioned earlier Federal OSHA. Federal OSHA pays 50% of all enforcement officers' salaries. So they want to know, what do we do with that money? We are monitored by Region 5 out of Chicago, and we have regular quarterly meetings with them either by phone or they drive or fly to Lansing to meet with us for sometimes as long as a half a day to talk about how are we doing in comparison to every other state in the nation. So what you're seeing here is what happened in relation to enforcement inspection. Surprisingly, 60% of the inspections that were done last year were focused on to the construction industry. Again, putting our resources in areas where we've identified and need the most attention. Higher risk, higher rates of injury concerns. Consultations, the consultation staff do consultations, maybe face-to-face, online, by phone, as well as doing hazard surveys. Admittedly, I would expect to see these numbers down next year because so many of our field activities have been reduced due to COVID. Very common issue that we're asked is, well, what do we cite when we're out there? When we're doing inspections, What are we finding? What are we citing? And this is a top 10 list, and there is some moving around of some of these, and there are some that are perennial favorites that show up year after year. For example, hazard communication is always part of our top 10 standards cited. Fall protection, shouldn't be surprised that that was commonly cited last year because that's been one of our focuses for a while now. Stop the falls. Lockout, tag out. Part 2, walking working surface, for the first time is on our top 10 list for last year cited standards. Scaffolds, another issue in relation to fall prevention, PPE, and powered industrial truck. And by the way, most of these hazards have companion MTI classes that you can attend if you want to learn more about how you can prevent some of these hazards and how you comply with the standards. We want you to stay connected. Yes.
I have another question. This one's from Diana Kemp. How many inspectors would conduct those approximately 5,000 inspection estimates? Previous slide.
So as far as actual staffing, so I don't have an exact number. I know that the general industry division is the largest staffing. SET has 31 consultants. Construction is a little smaller than SET when it comes to field staff, and general industry, I said, is the largest. So my guess is they're close to about 50 field staff.
Great. Thank you for your question, Diana.
As I was mentioning earlier about our efforts to connect, we do a quarterly newsletter. It is now fall time. We're working on our winter issue that will be coming out probably in January-ish. Our e-news comes out the first Tuesday of every month. The intent of that is to provide you timely information in short bites. We try to keep the e-news limited to about 2 screen links, 3 usually the max. Gov delivery, I mentioned that earlier. We try to send out short, quick messages that have relevance to our subscribers 2 or 3 times a week. And all these things are available just by you signing up for them. From our website, you can sign up to receive the e-news, news, and Gov delivery notices at michigan.gov/MIOSHA. We have a Facebook page, a YouTube clip. Earlier this week, I was talking with Audrey, who's the IH in the room with us today, who has been very involved with the COVID issues, about some YouTube videos that we have posted on our website as it relates to COVID. And we were saying, should we take this down? And she was telling me, well, no, people are actually looking at this thing. So if there's a topic that you think might be more acceptable, useful for you in a training session, be it as a YouTube clip, please let us know. We try to accommodate and grow with our clients' requests, but we need to hear that from you in relation to what you need to help address some of the safety and health issues in the workplace. Remember this slide? Just a nice reminder that we all play a part, safety and health professionals, in seeing this continuous downward trend in rates. And again, these are rates based on 100 full-time workers, reductions in severe illness and injuries, and that's our job. We're here to help you, and we'll do our best to provide assistance in making a difference in your workplace safety and health program. I would like to thank VHS for their hosting of this event today. I drove over to Granville this morning to have the opportunity to sit with the group and ensure that everything was technically sound. I really appreciate the offer of their facility and ASSP for sponsoring this event. Additional questions?
Yes, I have a question, Nella, and that last slide you showed twice, I think that's excellent performance for the last decade, 61% improvement. How does that compare with the national?
We're pretty close to the, we're actually a little below the national average. I want to say the national average is 3.3 or 3.5, but considering that we are one of the heavier manufacturing states compared to Wyoming, I would say that we do an excellent job compared to the national rate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We
Chris.
did recently get an email this morning here that had the most 12 recent fatalities,
Mm-hmm.
and 11 of those were COVID related. One was fall. That just came out here a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and I'm glad Chris brought that up. For those that may not have heard, is if you're following our fatality notice, you're seeing a huge uptick in the number of fatality reported. And some of those are things that have happened months ago, and you may wonder, well, why did it take so long to share that information? Some of it was verification that it truly was a workplace related fatality. How can we show that the source of the exposure was work related? And as well, because in some cases these are symptoms, don't lend themselves till the time that person is in the intensive care ward, and there may be months down the line, unfortunately, before they pass due to COVID exposure. So there's just a long time periods, and so it's not like some of these acute situations we're seeing with being struck by a piece of equipment or falling in a trench. These are sometimes taking us months to establish that this person fatality related to a workplace COVID exposure.
Are you seeing any pockets of, let's say, it's coming mainly from first responders or from manufacturing, construction, or is it just all over the board?
No, if you look at most of those fatalities, they tend to be hospitals. I want to say the last 3 or 4 were east side of the state hospitals. At least 3 hospitals, different hospitals come to mind of some of the cases that we're reporting on.
Is it fair to say that it was maybe due to not having enough PPE available?
Each case has been different, and that's been part of the time of really getting involved and investigating what happened to maybe see if we could correct the problem or somehow address what can be done to minimize additional hazards. But at this point, I'm not comfortable saying that, yeah, I can say with confidence that it was directly related to lack of PPE or improper use of PPE.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got a question for you about the MIOSHA grants. Historically, have they always given out the full $250,000 throughout the year? And if they have, how fast does that money get depleted?
The first year, the money was depleted within the first 7-8 months of the year, because it was that was in 2015, so it was a new opportunity, and people are like, whoa, so it was gone on even before we were able to actually promote it. Now it's kind of become more of a common thing, and so I'm pretty sure, so our fiscal year ended in September. They were still looking at applications up to, I want to say we're still looking up at applications up to July. Okay. And that could be because of COVID. You know, I think of it as that because they were down for a 2-3 month time period, they weren't submitting applications earlier. So we are seeing fairly robust use of the MIOSHA money.
We have a couple of questions from the audience here. One's from M. Vesquez. If an employer purchases a ladder fabricated from an outside company, does the employer have to confirm that the ladder is OSHA compliant prior to installing it on site?
Whoa, I am definitely opening that one up to one of my MIOSHA representatives. Is that a construction related or
It says associated with general industry
general industry?
and commercial construction.
Does Catherine or Tara want to take
Oh, I'm
that
sorry,
question?
I was jumping
Yeah,
ahead of that.
I can speak to that.
It didn't really say,
Mhm.
I suppose, when they say something like on-site, I tend to think it's construction.
I hear you.
Tara, that or Catherine.
Yeah, Tara's on, she's not,
Yeah, so we
Catherine
have
right
in
there.
construction, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, who's on the line?
This is Tara.
All right, that's what we were hoping we'd hear from you, Tara. Would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, so we do have in our part 11, which is our ladder standard in construction, it does speak to job built ladders. So typically manufacturers will build to ANSI standards and they will come ready to be used properly and to the standard. But you can manufacture your own ladders or have outside companies manufacture your ladders. Just follow the standard. The standard has requirements for how big it is, the width of the ladder itself, the distance between the rungs. There are specific requirements for that. So there's not going to be an OSHA approved ladder per se, but you can go to the standard. It's not a very big standard, and it gives clear definitions of how to build your own ladder to meet the compliance.
The same rule would be correct in general industry. It's up to the employer to make sure that the items that they're exposed to their employees to are going to be compliant to OSHA and MIOSHA. So if you're going to have a ladder fabricated by a manufacturer, I mean, they'll fabricate anything you want, but it's ultimately your responsibility because you are exposing your employees to the ladder and any potential hazard that they could be exposed to. And that, the information for ladders is going to be in the general industry part 2, walking working surface standard.
Thank you, Tara and Chris. And by the way, Chris, Deb, Audrey, our set consultants, that their phone numbers and their email address are published on our website under our consultant directory if you want to get back with them for more detailed follow-up later.
I think the last question that we have is coming from Carlton Hockman. And I think, Nella, you may have already answered this question just a couple of minutes ago. With complaints that have recently come through with COVID, are they generally associated with GI, commercial construction, or residential type work?
Primarily general industry, and as much as we can publish, but when it becomes readily available, like the job classification, the age and sex of that person is published on our fatality notification. And some of these are expanded at the employer's willingness to participate in a program called FACE. FACE is a program run by MSU. FACE stands for Fatal and Catastrophic Events. It is a national program funded by NIOSH. MSU has staff that follow up on workplace-related fatalities. And so it's separate from a MIOSHA inspection. And in events when they have compliance and agreement from the employer, the family of the victim, and co-workers, they interview and assess the fatality to do as much of an analysis of the fatality as possible, and those reports are published and available on the MSU website, and in some cases linked to the MIOSHA fatalities. And some of these reports can get fairly lengthy in trying to evaluate the fatality. So I expect that the FACE project will start doing more deeper dives into some of these COVID fatalities that are happening now with the employer's cooperation.
Thank you, Noel, for that response. And Carlton, I hope that answered your question. And now we move over to SR. He or she has a question, and I think this one's very interesting. And it is there anything that highlights the difference between the MIOSHA emergency order and the executive orders?
That is a good question. And because Audrey and I have been living this for a while, what we did was when we being MIOSHA, when we initially draft the emergency rules, we had to take in consideration what we have authority over. What does the MIOSHA Act give us the authority to do? It gives us the authority to enforce rules in workplace as it relates to employee safety and health. So as much as possible, we try to stay in our lane as it relates to all the executive order requirements that apply to workplace issues, and those that apply to community issues were covered by the epidemic orders that were issued by the Health and Human Services Department. So if you look, if you were to do a side-by-side comparison, Audrey, would you say probably 90% of the executive order language is in our emergency rules?
Yeah, I'd say 90% between our emergency order and the MDHHS public health emergency orders. Almost all of it was translated into the two separate entities.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, if you were following the governor's executive orders and understood them and were complying with them, you're probably in very good shape with complying with the emergency rules.
And we have a question from Katie H. For the emergency screening requirements and the logs affiliated, is it sufficient to log denied entries based on screenings? Or do they need to have records of the past screenings as well? This is in an office setting of less than 30 employees.
So with the new MIOSHA emergency rule, it requires you to keep record of all records for your employees and visitors of that health screening, not just the ones who are denied. And then we also have the requirement to keep those records for a year after they were generated. So you'll have to keep record of everybody that's coming into your facility.
Okay, and Catherine pretty much summarizes that very same statement. Mm-hmm. And Catherine's the construction compliance officer.
The general energy compliance officer. And so Catherine, my understanding is her coverage is Kent County primarily.
All right, thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Audrey.
Well, it makes me feel better that my MIOSHA staff got an opportunity to answer some questions.
All right, and Katie has another follow-up question, and I'm not so sure what she means by this. Maybe you guys do. Is there a template for these logs?
Screen logs.
You want to answer that one?
We don't have a MIOSHA template. We just have the basic recommended questions that you're supposed to ask based on exposure and symptoms, along with temperature screening if you can, but there is no standard template.
All right. Thanks, Audrey. And thanks for that question, Katie. That was a good one. Any other last questions? Or any questions? Whether it's construction, whether it's general industry, whether it's for the subdivision or for enforcement. Okay, I don't see, well, wait a minute. I think I see something coming through. Maybe not. All right, if you guys think of any questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out. I do have another question coming through from SR. This might be covered in the emergency order, but do you have guidelines on masks in the workplace? For example, if staff share an office and are 6 feet apart, should they wear masks at all times?
You want to take that one? No. And she's shaking her head because our policy has been that when consultants are doing presentations, they're masked. We have an issue that relates to shared space, walking to and from bathrooms. But in answer to the question, do they have to wear masks all the time if they are social distancing? No, they do not.
Okay, so the answer is no, they do not.
Yeah.
Thank you, now.
Well, I will wrap it up. Appreciate all your questions and your attention
Got a good one for insurance there.
and the participation of the MIOSHA staff today. I appreciate that. And again, don't take this event as a one-time opportunity to reach out to MIOSHA. You got our names, our phone numbers. Feel free to contact with additional safety and health questions.
You know, there's one question that came in. Can MIOSHA share success stories of organization in combating COVID-19 at the workplace?
That is funny you mentioned that, because on our website, there is a link for folks to submit to Leo. Leo is our umbrella department. Our communication staff is looking for success stories from employers of how they've addressed COVID issues so that we can publish them either as a YouTube clip or an article or a testimonial. So yes, feel free to click that. I'm pretty sure there's just a short little submittal piece for them to have an understanding of what you did and what your success is.
Okay, then we have another question, and it sounds like it's an NEC NFPA 70 question dealing with arc flash. Is it required that we have electrical engineer perform analysis on every electrical circuit, or can we go with the highest values and place an arc flash explosion sticker on each box based on that?
Wow, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Does any of the Catherine or Tara or Chris or Deb have a understanding of some of the arc flash issues that they'd like to share?
This is Tara. I can't speak from a construction perspective on everything there, but in construction, when we're dealing with electrical circuits, any electrical work, installation has to be done by a qualified electrician or somebody working under the tutelage of a licensed electrician. So, the electrical engineer, I'm not sure how that fits in, but that work does need to be done by a licensed electrician who understands all the circuits and the requirements to code. I'm not sure if that answers it.
So my understanding is you do need to do an analysis if you are going to be working live, period. I'm looking for the math. The math is typically being done by an engineer or somebody who is certified to give that information. MIOSHA does not enforce NFPA. We do say that you have to guard your pupils to their level of exposure. So if you're going to be working live, which is a big if and should never really happen unless it's an emergency, you have some life-saving electrical issues that need to run, and that's why you cannot lock it out. For the most part, you should be locking out. And if you're not going to be locking out, then yes, we are looking for the math to be done for the arc flash potential.
I'm so glad you got an opportunity to pipe in, Deb. And what you just said sounds like a conversation I just had with a consultant on the east side of the state, Jeff, and it sounds like a project he's been wanting to take a deeper dive into. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Can I touch on what Tara said too? As far as the electrical installations, and where I don't want anybody here to get confused, the difference between what general industry allows and what construction or what you need a licensed engineer for, there you have to understand what's like for like and what is going to be considered construction. So you have a lot of in-house facilities and maintenance people that might be doing stuff that needs to be done by an electrical engineer. If it is considered new in any way, shape, or form, it needs to be done by an engineer or under the tutelage of a licensed electrician.
Thanks, Deb.
Okay, well, that concludes our time with MIOSHA. I want to thank all of MIOSHA staff for participating. I think they did an excellent job in the presentation. I go to these events every year, and the information is always updated. It's always nice to stay up on top of what happened in the past 12 months per se, and what we can expect going forward. And I also want to thank you, the audience, participating. You guys asked a lot of good questions, and I'm sure that those that were listening to the questions and the responses will walk away with something that they didn't know before they came to this meeting. So again, thank you for that. Knowledge is power, and with that knowledge, we can help keep our facilities and our people safer. And again, if you have any questions following this, because I know sometimes after the conclusion of any type of meeting, you think, oh my goodness, I wish I would have asked this question. So there will be opportunities for that, and we'll get you the right experts to be able to respond to those questions. And again, this entire presentation has been recorded, so you can go ahead and review that. And again, for those that have missed this opportunity, they don't have to miss it completely. They can go ahead and gather this information too for their benefit. So again, at this time, we're going to sign off. And again, thank you for everyone's participation. Have a good rest of the week, and please be safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.